What's up, gamers? Today I want to talk about the new Talk of the Town, the big new gacha that has been announced by the Tower of Fantasy developers, Neverness to Everness. And I've seen this trailer, I've watched the gameplay trailer and the cinematic one, and I just want to talk about some of the stuff that they have, especially in this gameplay trailer, and give you my thoughts on it, and tell you kind of where my head is at regarding this game. Let's jump into the trailer. So I want to go through all the different types of gameplay and features that they showed off and just talk about them a little bit, what my thoughts are, and at the end I'll kind of tell you where I'm at with everything in general. So let's start with the combat that they showed us. So after this little cutscene here, we get a little bit of a taste of the combat. This vending machine pops out and becomes a monster. That's a pretty neat design. I like it. But this looks, animation-wise and just fluidity-wise, this combat looks a little bit rough. It's a little bit hard to see what's going on, the effects still look very early, and to be fair, this game may not come out for several years, so I'm willing to give this a pass for now. It doesn't look like... Was there a dodge there? I couldn't even see an animation for it. But yeah, this looks alright for the time being, but I hope they will heavily improve on this. I'm sure they will. I'm assuming this is the main focus of the game. This will be their main gameplay mechanic, so I'm sure the combat will improve with time. But overall, looks a bit rough for now. Let's move on to the next thing that I want to talk about. Let's talk about another central mechanic that they loved to show off. Let's talk about the driving. So, driving is an interesting one for me, because driving is a hard thing for games to nail. There's a lot of games that have tried to implement driving and failed miserably. There's a reason, I think, that a lot of racing games only have driving as their central mechanic, because they have to spend so much dev time making it feel as smooth and as good as possible. So this, to not become, tedious, and not make players want to just use fast travel points, assuming they have fast travel points, they're going to have to make this feel very good. They're going to need to make sure there's some sort of skill expression with the driving. Because we see later that they have a chase scene, I'm sure they'll have races and stuff, but all the customization and all the cool fancy stuff doesn't matter if the mechanic itself is not fun to do. Because players, if they don't enjoy the driving, and they don't just enjoy cruising around the city in their car, they're not going to use them. So this just seems like something they're going to have to work on a lot if they want people to enjoy it. I'm sure they can pull it off, but it is a big thing that they will have to put time and effort into as far as dev resources. They show here that you can interact with some sellers. They also show later on that you can interact and buy a house, but you can go in here, buy some cars, customize your cars. I think that's neat, as long as they keep up with plenty of customization, and if they stay away from monetizing this stuff too heavily, it should be a pretty fun mechanic to have. Nothing I really have an issue with here. This is all good stuff, good flavor for the world. Here's the apartment here. I'm assuming we will be able to customize this. I don't 100% know. I'm assuming they don't have that completely made yet. I'm sure that system is in the works. But I don't really see a point in having an apartment if I can't change it around. It looks nice as is, but hopefully they'll allow us to customize it to some extent. Yep, and this is another mechanic. You can do the standard open world to change time of day. It's fine. It is what it is. City looks nice at night. Let's also talk about the wall climbing briefly, because that is right around here. She goes outside, switches characters. And yes, so she does this ability, and all of a sudden she can walk on the wall. So this, to me, is interesting. If you want a character to have a specific ability like this that allows them to have this traversal mechanic, that seems like an incredibly large amount of development effort to make sure that every building and surface in this game has a collider. That seems like a lot of effort for a single ability for a single character. Now, if they had like climbing or something in this game, then maybe that would change things if there was like a universal climb mechanic. But I'm not sure I'm convinced that this is going to apply everywhere and that you can just walk up any wall in any part of the city, because that would be an titanic task just to make a single character have a cool ability. I think what's more likely is they may have areas where you can use this ability, where they've actually modeled out the structures of the buildings, but modeling all this geometry and then adding collision to every single piece of it, especially in like a cityscape environment, is not something that is like just thrown together. Maybe it's easier in Unreal 5, but I'm assuming it's probably similar to other engines, and I'm not convinced that this is something that they can maintain and continue to make other mechanics for other characters that take a similar amount of effort. It's cool. It looks cool for the trailer, but I'm not convinced that this mechanic is going to be consistently applied and other characters are going to have cool stuff like it, unless it's like a universal mechanic. But yeah. Yeah, then we get the standard glider. When I saw this, I was like, can we do a little bit better? There's a reason that games like Genshin Impact and Breath of the Wild use gliders, and it's because they're in like medieval settings. They don't have the technology to like fly or anything, but I feel like we can come up with something a bit more creative than just this character that just gliding down as far as movement to either like get down from high places or... Yeah, this just seems a bit like they're just copy-pasting and they don't really know what else to do, so they're just including it because every other game like this has it. And I wish they could do something a bit more. Now, the other thing that I would want to talk about is the dimension hopping. Right after you defeat these enemies, here you enter this door, and you go through a bunch of dimensions. And they do some trippy stuff. Have some scary areas, some like horror-themed bits. It's neat. It looks good. My thing with this is that I think this is just going to be a story mechanic. I think it's probably not going to be something that applies to the entire world. You're not going to be able to just use your ghost vision and then hop into a different dimension anywhere in the city. This seems like something that they apply to the story because that would be a monumental task to try and redo the entire city with like different, like placing everything in different ways, making things float, having different like enemy types spread around. I think this is going to be like story stuff, or what this may be is just them trying to show off environments that they can have. Because you go between like several different environments here, and it just seems... They don't seem particularly connected. Maybe they are. Maybe there's like an explanation for this in the story. But to me, this seems like we're showing off what we can do with these dimensions. And I'm not sure that they're going to be able to like consistently do this outside of maybe some story content. Because making like detailed stuff like this that is like custom made... It's hard. It takes time. And I don't think they can do it consistently throughout the city. Now, the world itself looks pretty good. There's some stuff that looks a little rough around the edges, but as far as, like, coloration, it's like some of these textures look a little bit flat for, like, the road and stuff. But for the most part, it looks pretty good. It's pretty colorful, especially at night. Once you get all the neon signs, the world looks pretty solid. But it's good to remember that the world is just a shell. It's something that you need to put gameplay mechanics and stuff inside of. So just because the world looks pretty does not necessarily mean that this game is going to have a lot to offer. And this is where I'm kind of at with this game. This seems like a very difficult task. A task to make an entire cityscape in a gacha style from the ground up. I mean, it seems like they have a lot of it made, but I don't know. And then filling that entire world with worthwhile things to do and interesting places to go and tons of interiors to buildings to go inside. This seems like a lot of work to do. And we've seen with games like GTA, we've seen it with Cyberpunk, it takes years and years and years to make these style of games and make them turn out well and have good content and good quality and just good polish. And it makes me worried. To me, this trailer reminds me of a certain Cyberpunk trailer. This one here, the 48-minute walkthrough. This was put out very early. It was a couple years before the game dropped, and it was basically an entire mission sequence that they put on their channel. Now, once the game finally dropped, a lot of people realized that a lot of this stuff that they have in here, a lot of the features and stuff, weren't in the actual game. The mission was still there, there was still some stuff, but it was not nearly as detailed or as interesting as this original mission led people to believe. Now, another issue that the Cyberpunk devs had is they made this initial mission for this trailer and for like gameplay showcases. It's one of the earlier missions in the game, and they added so many choices and they added so many mechanics that it seems like they never had the time to fill out the rest of the game and bring it up to the standard of this mission. And this is where a lot of the sentiment around Cyberpunk under-delivering came from. There's a lot of mechanics that they show off in here that were not in at launch, and obviously the performance issues were a massive issue as well. This trailer for NTE is something that reminds me a lot of that trailer. It feels like they put everything that they have done so far in the trailer, and they presented it to us, but it makes me wonder if you go down one of these alleys that they're not showing us with the camera, is there anything there? Are they going to be able to fill this world out? Are they going to make this world able to be run on mobile devices? If this is going to be a mobile game, will it even run on like mid-level PC devices? I mean, making a game with this many reflections, I mean, you can see once we go to nighttime that this game has a lot of lighting going on. And people who don't have decent PCs may struggle with this. I mean, just look at the lighting on the flooring, right? It's reflecting, like, everything here. And then every single city light. So it's a lot to render in. And if it comes out in a couple years, then, hey, maybe things will be better. Maybe it'll be able to run better for most people. But this seems like an incredibly ambitious game. And it seems like this may be another case of overpromise and underdeliver. And I'm nervous for the performance. I'm nervous for them delivering on this concept. This, especially considering the development team behind it. I didn't play Tower of Fantasy myself, but I have read a little bit about what people think, and it seems like some things were fixed, but it was an absolute mess at launch, and it still never hit the heights that people hoped for it. And the thing about Rush Games is that oftentimes it's not the developers who are at fault. Either there's a budget issue, or the higher-ups of the company are forcing the developers to put it out early so that they can start making money off of it. There's things that could cause this game to come out in an underbaked state, and the fact that it happened once with Tower of Fantasy makes me believe that it is much more likely to happen again, considering that the Hoda Games has not changed who they work under. It's still part of the same group. Like, these are still the same people who made Tower of Fantasy. It may have been a budget issue with the first one, but who's to say that the media group that owns them is not going to want them to push this out as soon as it is sort of ready, whether there's some glitches still in there, whether it's polished or not. And that's the thing, is I don't want people to get too excited about this, because this is a huge concept, and it is still very early on. I'm not saying they can't pull it off, but I think you should be skeptical about this. And being one of the only people who is not paid to watch this trailer, I hope that you can trust that I am not going to hold up this game in any regard for any monetary reason. If it's good, great, but I am highly skeptical, and I don't think you should be too excited until we see it much further along in progress. Anyway, that's my thoughts on Neverness to Everness. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Always happy to hear you guys' thoughts, and take care, guys.